Welcome into this week's special edition of the SEC Roundtable for Bracketology. Alongside Stan Smith, I'm Dalton Abel, and we're here to break down the South region. All right, Stan, Florida is the #1 overall seed, facing Albany in the first round. Who do you got?
The 16 seed has never beaten a 1 seed, and this Florida team has 4 senior starters. Florida's definitely going to move on.
And I'm with you there. No need to bring out the red pen. Colorado Pitt in the 8-9 matchup. Who are you taking there?
I got Pittsburgh. They've had an up and down year. So has Colorado, but Pittsburgh has more impressive wins than the Buffaloes do. Colorado has also been without their star player Spencer Dinwiddie for most of the season with a torn ACL. I have Pitt moving on.
I'm with you there. Pitt, very strong front court with Talib Zana and Lamar Patterson. I think they take down the Buffaloes with relative ease. 5-12 matchup, VCU, Stephen F. Austin. Stephen F. Austin's won 28 in a row out of the Southland Conference. Do you see them pulling the 12-5 upset?
28 straight wins is impressive no matter who you play, but VCU's experience, they've been here before. I have the Rams with Shaka Smart moving on.
They got the experience factor, went to the Final Four in 2011. They're going to see if they can make it 2 in 4 years. 4-13 UCLA, Pac-12 champions, beat Arizona on Saturday night. They have Tulsa and Coach Danny Manning in the first round. Who do you have?
I have the UCLA Bruins. They have a very high-powered offense led by Jordan Adams, who averages over 17 points a game. The Bruins will be moving on to face the Rams.
All right, we're all good. No red pen yet. Ohio State Dayton 6-11 matchup, in-state matchup. Who do you got?
I have the Ohio State Buckeyes. A lot of people say that the Flyers will upset the Buckeyes, but this is when Ohio State will show that they are the better team than the Flyers. Dayton kind of just barely got in the tournament. But I think Ohio State, led by Aaron Kraft, will move on.
You know, sometimes all you need to do is get in. VCU was one of the last 4 teams in a few years ago, ran all the way to the Final Four. Dayton, since February 1st, has lost to 1 team, and that has been St. Joseph's. Ohio State is not St. Joseph's. I'm going with Dayton. Dayton has junior guard Jordan Seibert, leads the team with 12.5 points a game, transferred from Ohio State. Got to be a little bad blood there. I'm taking the Flyers to upset Ohio State in the first game on Thursday. Syracuse, Western Michigan, 3-14 matchup. Syracuse has dropped 5 out of their last 7. Do they end their skid against Western Michigan?
They looked like a #1 seed about a month ago. I do think the Cuse will move on, but don't sleep on Western Michigan. They're a very good team.
I'm not sleeping on Western Michigan. This is my shocker of the first round. Western Michigan scored 98 points in their MAC championship game against Toledo. David Brown scored 32 points in that game. He averages about a 19.5 a season per game this season. I'm going with Western Michigan. I think that Syracuse's zone is as smothering as it is. They need to put up points. CJ Fair and Tyler Ennis have been doing all the work on offense. Trevor Cooney's been in a major shooting slump. Jeremy Grant needs to provide more offense out of the front court. I think Western Michigan gets enough points to beat Cuse. New Mexico, Stanford in the 7-10 matchup. The Lobos, many say, underseeded after winning their 3rd straight Mountain West Conference tournament title. Who do you got?
New Mexico definitely learned from their upset last year to Harvard. I think the Lobos will move on.
I'm with you there. And Kansas, does Eastern Kentucky have a shot?
I think they'll put up a good fight in the first half. Kansas is without Joel Embiid, but I do think Kansas will move on.
I'm with you there. I think Kansas has too much depth to fall victim to that 2-15 upset. Let's go back to the top, 2nd round now, or 3rd round now. Florida versus Pitt. Who do you got?
I got the Gators. I think they will play a good game. They have a good defense. Florida also has a very good defense as well. But again, the seniors from Florida will carry the Gators to the 4th round, the Sweet 16.
Yeah, this could be first one to get to 60 wins. Both teams have lockdown defenses. Pitt coming out of the Big East. They still play with that mentality, both with good defenses, but I think Florida squeaks it out also. VCU, UCLA in the 4-5 matchup. This is going to be a good one if we get to it. Who do you like in this one?
This is strength against strength because VCU leads as one of the top turnover forcer defenses in the country. They force a lot of steals and a lot of block shots. UCLA is a very good offensive team. I think that the Bruins will top the Rams.
Before the Pac-12 tournament, UCLA had not won 2 straight games away from home. I think they fall back into their trend against VCU. VCU's smothering defense. forces the turnovers from UCLA. UCLA going to commit turnovers, and I like VCU to advance to face Florida. Now, totally different here. You got Ohio State versus Syracuse. What are you looking at?
This is a game of matchups. Both of these teams have kind of sputtered down the stretch, but Ohio State will pull this one out. They've played just slightly better than the Orange over the past month.
And double-digit seeds are always getting into the Sweet 16. Someone's got to hear if what I say comes true. You never know. Madness of March. But I'm going with Dayton to take down Western Michigan and end the Broncos' run in the second round. Back down to the bottom, New Mexico, Kansas. Does Kansas have enough to get by?
I think they do. This will be a very close game. They will probably still be without Joel Embiid for the first weekend of the tournament. I do have Kansas moving on.
So a lot of people like Kansas to go down here. It's a tough matchup for them. New Mexico, very physical team. Reigning Mountain West Player of the Year, Kendall Williams. They also have senior forward Cameron Barstow. Joel Embiid may not be on the floor, but Kansas is just too deep. And I'm going to take Kansas as well. No pen. Florida versus UCLA in your Sweet 16 matchup. Who are you taking?
Again, this is another strength versus strength game. The tournament is all about matchups. And the four seniors for Florida, led by Scotty Wilbekin, the Wildebeest, will move on to the regional final. They'll top the Bruins.
Yeah, Florida has not been at full strength and lost yet this year. I think that trend continues. Too much depth, too much senior leadership. I'm going with the Gators as well. Ohio State and Kansas in your other regional matchup, who's going to advance?
Depending on whether or not Joel Embiid comes back, they're still led by Andrew Wiggins, a freshman phenom, and Kansas will top Ohio State in a slugfest.
And I think if the Dayton Flyers are lucky enough to make it this far, the clock will strike midnight. Kansas too tough, too powerful, too many good guards on the perimeter to hang with the Jayhawks, and I'm going to take Kansas to advance. Florida and Kansas, we both got in the Elite Eight. Who's going to the Final Four?
These seniors for Florida have been to 3 straight Elite Eights. They're not going to let this pass up. They will move on to Dallas, Texas.
Yep. This will be the 4th Elite Eight trip for Florida if they make it there. They're looking to make it to the Final Four for the first time in the last 4 years, and I think Billy Donovan does just that with his squad, and Florida's going to go back to the Final Four.
Well, there you have it. That's the South region.
So we're transitioning from the South bracket to the East bracket, and we have our resident Virginia expert here because he's from Charlottesville, John Dowdy. My name is Austin Lewis. And so, John, who do you have winning in the Virginia-Coastal Carolina game?
Well, obviously, I'm going to take UVA in this matchup. They run this thing called a pack line defense, which has allowed them to have the top scoring defense in the country. They allow just over 55 points a game. I think they shut down Coastal.
Former South Carolina player Anthony Gill is on that Virginia team, and Virginia has the ACC Coach of the Year in Tony Bennett. So I'm with you, John. Definitely, Virginia is winning. Mm-hmm. And so we have Memphis and George Washington.
I'm taking Memphis in this game. They also have a strong offense. They're going to overwhelm George Washington.
Completely agree. I trust Josh Pastner in the NCAA tournament, and Joe Jackson is the leading scorer for them. I think Joe Jackson's been too much of a matchup problem for George Washington. So now we go to Cincinnati and Harvard.
I think we're going to disagree here. I'm taking Cincy in this matchup. I don't think Harvard's going to have their dream run to the tournament like they have recently. Cincy overpowers them.
Completely disagree. I think Cincinnati's main method of scoring is Sean Kilpatrick. I don't trust anybody else on Cincinnati's team. Harvard has consistent scoring from all 5 starters, and I have to give one to Tommy Amaker, who's done a fantastic job at Harvard, and I'm kind of rooting for the little guy in the Ivy League right now. So I am definitely going with the Crimson here, and I'm definitely pulling for the Ivy League in this one.
They did well in the Ivy. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Michigan State, Delaware. I'm taking Sparty in this matchup. They're back at full strength. They're recovered from all their injuries. They're going to sweep Delaware.
Too much scoring from Michigan State. I think Adrian Payne has turned to one of the best big men in the country. Gary Harris is exceptional as a sophomore. Keith Appling is an experienced point guard. I think MSU has just way too much, and they just killed it in the Big Ten tournament this year. Mm-hmm. And so now we have North Carolina Providence.
I'm taking UNC. I'm sticking with the ACC in this matchup. After starting 1-4 in ACC play, they basically swept the rest of their conference play. They've figured out who they are as a team. They take down Providence in the first round.
UNC is a really interesting team to me because they beat Duke and they've been remarkably consistent. in the final half of the season. And Marcus Page is one of the best guards in the country, so I'm definitely going with UNC here. They present a real matchup for some teams later in the tournament. And so now we have Iowa State and North Carolina Central.
It's an offense versus defense matchup. I'm taking Iowa State.
Completely agree. 4 double-digit scores from Iowa State. Melvin Ejim is just an absolute monster, leading them in blocks and points and rebounding. So Iowa State's is going to, I think they will destroy North Carolina Central. No disrespect to North Carolina Central, but I just think Iowa State's in a different class of talent than North Carolina Central. So now we have UConn and St. Joe's, and this is one where I think a lot of people are going to struggle with this matchup.
I picked St. Joe's in this matchup. They also are relying heavily on their offense. So, and UConn doesn't have many signature wins this season, so I'm taking St. Joe's in this matchup.
This matchup right here actually presents my favorite matchup of anybody else in the first round, with Langston Galloway against Shabazz Napier. Shabazz Napier's kind of been a one-man team for UConn, but I just think St. Joe's, I think they have too much consistency, and they have a big man named Halil Kinasevich who leads them in rebounds, assists, and blocks per game. So he presents, I think, one of the biggest matchup problems for anybody else in this tournament. So I'm definitely going with St. Joe's. And so now we have Villanova and Milwaukee.
I'm taking Nova. They've kind of been off of my radar for most of this season, but they're coming in as a 2 seed. They've got a strong offense. I don't think Milwaukee has much of a chance.
I have no faith in Nova, but I think Nova is just going to beat Milwaukee. I think it'll be a lot closer than people expect because I watched that Seton Hall Nova game, and Nova just does not look like a 2 seed to me. And I agree with you, Nova here, but I think later in the tournament, I don't think they have a shot. So now we're going on to UVA and Memphis.
I'm taking UVA in this one as well. Again, their defense keeps game scores low. I'm worried about their offensive production getting later in the tournament. I still think their defense is going to shut down Memphis.
I completely agree with you there. I think UVA just has too much consistency and has really good perimeter defenders, and I don't trust Memphis inside, because when your leading scorer is Joe Jackson at 14 points a game, that shows you're not getting as much production from inside. And I just think UVA, completely agree with you, their defense is just way too good, and so I've got UVA, definitely. And so you have Cincy at Michigan State, and I have Harvard against Michigan State.
I've got Sparty in this one as well. Again, they're fully healthy. They have a very physical team. I don't think Cincy's going to be able to shut them down. I've got Sparty in the Sweet 16.
For Michigan State, completely agree. I think Michigan State will overwhelm them with size, and they just have too much consistent scoring, and they looked like probably one of the best 2 teams in the country in that Big Ten tournament, just destroying Michigan and just steamrolling everybody in that tournament. So now we have UNC Iowa State. Who do you have here?
I took Iowa State in this matchup. UNC, like I said, they started off the season very up and down. Sure, they found themselves against the ACC, but you're moving out. Iowa State's going to overwhelm them.
Iowa State presents too many matchup problems for UNC. Georges Niang, presents a really huge matchup with his size and his ability to just get scoring. And Melvin Ejim, I think, is a much better post player than anybody else on UNC. I mean, do you really trust James Michael McAdoo against Ejim? I don't.
Not
so
much,
definitely,
no.
I'm going with Iowa State in this matchup. So now we have St. Joe's Nova.
I took Nova in this matchup. Like I said, they've been kind of off my radar. So they're a 2 seed. I trust them as a 2 seed. You don't. You've said that already. I'm taking Nova.
Jay Wright will choke again, as Nova will choke once again, as they always do. And I'm going with St. Joe's. I think Langston Galloway is going to be is just going to go off in this game. I think he's just going to have his coming out party. And I think Halil Kinasevich presents a really big match problem for Nova inside. I just don't trust Nova at all. They don't have that signature win. I mean, they got destroyed by Creighton multiple times.
A lot of people got destroyed by Creighton.
I know, but
Doug McDermott.
Yeah, Doug McDermott is probably the best player in the country. He is the best player in the country. He's number 5 overall in scoring. But Nova's just they got blown out one too many times, and I just don't trust him. So now we go UVA and Michigan State in what is probably going to be one of the most interesting Sweet 16 matchups in the tournament.
This would be a good matchup. I wish I could pull for UVA in this matchup. I think Michigan State's going to overwhelm the pack line defense and get the best of the Cavaliers.
This is going to be an incredible coaching matchup between Tom Izzo and Tony Bennett to see who can kind of make their matchups to kind of who can get their strengths, like kind of who has the best matchup towards their strengths. I think it's Michigan State because I think Michigan State just has too much scoring. They have lots of size. And they haven't had those impressive wins. I mean, they got blown out by Tennessee. And Tennessee's just in a playing game. So I think it's definitely Michigan State. Michigan State is way too impressive right now. So unfortunately for the ACC champs, I think UVA is going out.
I sadly have to agree with you there.
So we're going Iowa State Nova or Iowa State St. Joe's.
Again, I'm taking Nova. You don't trust them. I'm going to trust them to work against Iowa State's offense. I'm putting them in the Elite Eight.
Iowa State presents too many matchups for St. Joe's. They have too much size. I think Melvin Ejim is going to just overwhelm Kanasevich, even though Kanasevich is a really interesting player with the way he can just dish the ball out and present and be a shot blocker. I just think they have too much scoring from their guards and scoring from their big guys inside. So I'm going with Iowa State. So we have Michigan State versus Nova or Michigan State versus Iowa State. You're going with?
I'm taking Nova in this matchup. Again, we may not trust Nova. This is going to be a dogfight if that's the best way to describe it. I'm taking Nova as the East Final Four contender.
Ugh. I just don't agree with you. I think it's Michigan State. I think this is going to be a really fun offensive matchup because Michigan State has the size to compete with Iowa State, and they have the guard play to compete with Iowa State. So I think I have Michigan State going to the Final Four because I trust Tom Izzo. He's got the experience. I don't think Iowa State has the Final Four or Elite Eight experience that Michigan State does. I think Michigan State just is going to beat them, so I have Michigan State in my Final Four.
And Tom Izzo has led Sparty to a national title before. He's been in this situation. I understand why he made this pick. I'm keeping with Nova.
I just don't trust Jay Wright. I just think their best team ever was when they had Scotty Reynolds, and that was the only time they made it to the Final Four. So I'm going with Michigan State, and you're going with Nova. And that is East Bracket, everybody. So now we're going to transition to the West Bracket.
Welcome back to the SEC Roundtable, everybody. We're working our way around the bracket and ready to break down the West region. I'm Brett Williams alongside Pat Cloney, and it's time to take on region number 3. So we're starting off number 1 Arizona, number 16 Weber State. Is this the year?
Brett, a 16 seed has never beaten a number 1 seed, and I still don't think it's going to happen here. Arizona's led by Aaron Gordon and Nick Johnson on the offensive side of the ball, but the defensive side of the ball is really where they thrive. They give up 58.1 points per game on just 38% field goal percentage. They are going to kick some Weber State butt in this one.
You know, Pat, I got to give you props for actually researching this game. I didn't research it at all. Weber State way overmatched by Arizona. No question there. Gonzaga, Oklahoma State, very interesting game. Oklahoma State, a lot of people didn't think they should be in this field. Gonzaga, always kind of a bracket buster, never really know what they're going to do. Who you got in this one?
You bring up a good point that a lot of people don't believe Oklahoma State should be in this tournament. They didn't have as great of a season that everyone thought they were going to be. People thought they were going to be top 10, but I think they're coming back. We'll start with the Zags for a minute. They outshoot opponents 50% to 39%, and they're led by David Stockton, son of an NBA legend. You can't go wrong with them, can you? But you can, because Oklahoma State has Marcus Smart coming back, the leader of their team. The Cowboys are 5-2 since Marcus Smart has come back from his suspension. Their only 2 losses are to ranked teams in overtime. I think Oklahoma State can go far in this tournament based solely on the fact that Marcus Smart is going to provide a real spark for this team. I have the Cowboys beating the Zags.
Absolutely a really roller coaster season for Oklahoma State with the whole Marcus Smart fiasco, but when they are on, they're together and they can play with any team in the country. Absolutely like Oklahoma State to take down Gonzaga. And that brings us to Oklahoma. Sooners having a good year. They're taking on the North Dakota State Bison. Always a shocker in football as well as basketball. This should be a good one.
You're absolutely right. And 12-5 matchups are always a fun one to take a look at because this is always where we see some of the best matchups and some of the best upsets. And I think that's going to happen here. Oklahoma scores at a blinding pace, 82.2 points per game, but they give up almost as many with almost 76 points per game. Meanwhile, North Dakota State prides itself on its defense, allowing just over 65 points per game, and it also has the best field goal percentage in the nation. Those two things combined are the perfect upset formula. And I think North Dakota State takes down the Sooners.
I think this is going to be a fantastic first-round matchup, and for all the reasons you said, and I'm also a big guy on when it comes to tradition, when it comes to mojo, momentum, anything that gets a program feeling up is going to help them out come March Madness time. Oklahoma, when you look at their football season, upset Alabama to win the Sugar Bowl, and as I mentioned before, with North Dakota State in football, just continue to dominate the FCS ranks. They translate that to basketball. The Sooners finishing the season winning 6 of 9. The Bison winning 14 of 15. Going to be very close, but I do like the Sooners in a tough Big 12. It's the first time we're going to break out that infamous red pen.
Looks to be our first of many disagreements on this bracket. Stay tuned for more.
Quite possibly. So that brings us to San Diego State, New Mexico State. A couple of obscure programs. What you got in this one?
The Aztecs play great defense. Opponents score just 56.6 points per game on 38% shooting, and that will be enough to get them past the Aggies. But a recent scoring funk could hurt them in later rounds. Stay tuned for that.
We've had quite a few years in a row now that that at least one number 13 seed has beaten number 4. It's turning into kind of like the 5-12 matchup. So you want to look for one of those upsets. And I think the Aggies have what it takes, specifically because San Diego State, been seeded pretty high in the last couple tournaments, never really lived up to their full potential. Despite having beaten Creighton and Kansas this year, I just have a feeling New Mexico State is going to pull off the upset. Baylor and Nebraska. So yet another Big 12 team in this region in the Bears. Nebraska, one of the bubble teams that just got in. Interesting matchup we have for the 6-11.
Absolutely right. And recall that a mediocre USC team played Baylor down to the wire at the beginning of this year when Baylor was ranked 10th in the nation. The Baylor Bears never really became the team that a lot of people thought they were going to be this year, and I think that hurts them. I think they're actually overseeded as a 6th seed. Meanwhile, Nebraska is on fire. They're 10-3 in their past 13 games, and this is just a gut feeling by me that says the Big Ten team that has wins against Wisconsin and Michigan State is going to prevail in this game. And I'm going with Nebraska if my pen will work.
I think you got some great reasons to pick Nebraska. Baylor, though, is red hot as well, winning 10 of their last 12 and the runner-up in the Big 12 tournament, ranked number 23 in the country. And remember that the Bears are in San Antonio for these first 2 rounds. I think that gives them the edge over the Huskers. And now the good old Ragin' Cajuns of Louisiana Lafayette taking on Creighton. Doug McDermott, best player in the country. Lafayette have what it takes?
You're right. I love the Raging Cajuns based solely on their name, but 2 words, Dougie McBuckets. He's the Wooden Award frontrunner. He's averaging, the Creighton offense is averaging just under 80 points per game led by him. Creighton could go a long way in this one. I love them in this matchup.
Ditto. That's all I got. Creighton.
Sweet.
Oregon and BYU, these 2 teams played earlier in the season, high-scoring offenses. Who you got?
You're absolutely right. Both teams score as fast as the Ducks football team scores, so this could be a really fun one to watch. But the Cougars are playing without key contributor Kyle Collinsworth, who tore his ACL in the WCC tournament. BYU also gives up 83.4 points per game away from home. I like Oregon in this one.
Yep, Oregon used to playing that high-speed offense, again with a stronger schedule. I like the Ducks over BYU. That brings us to Wisconsin and American, our final first-round matchup. Gotta love the Eagles, but the Badgers.
That's right. Kudos for our partner Austin Lewis over here. He's the one who changed this to Red American over here. You gotta love that the Eagles are a team in this tournament, but I am absolutely in love with the Wisconsin Badgers. Bo Ryan's teams usually in the past have won games based solely on defense, but this year they've got a stellar offense to back it up. They're averaging 73.5 points per game. Badgers take care of business in this one and look for them to go far as well.
Wisconsin got a lot of potential, certainly. American, me being from just outside of D.C., I know a lot of people are hyped about the Eagles, think they have had a great season, and they have and should be proud of it, but they're playing in Milwaukee, Wisconsin way too much for American. And we now transition to the second round, Arizona, Oklahoma State for both of us. Very interesting matchup here.
Absolutely. Brett, anything can happen in March Madness, and I'm always looking for at least one top seed to go down in the early rounds, and I think this is where that could happen. And I've got one name for you, Marcus Smart of Oklahoma State. I mentioned him before. I think Oklahoma State can ride solely on the newfound power that they have with him back in the lineup. Arizona also lost one of their key contributors, Brandon Ashley, to injury a couple weeks back. Since then, they're only 9-4, so they look more like maybe a 3-4 seed since they lost Brandon Ashley. I think Oklahoma State pulls off this upset. You might have different ideas, though.
I do, and I believe Marcus Smart is that powerful. Like I said earlier, Oklahoma State can really play with anybody in the country, but Arizona's just been consistent. And you look at the way that they've been balanced, the way they can play as a unit, tough defense but great offense, all the guys individually contributing, Aaron Gordon and Nick Johnson leading the way. I think Arizona is going to have just too much in the end, though I wouldn't be surprised to see the Cowboys get to Anaheim, I believe, is where they're going to play.
I believe you're right. Regardless, it's going to be a great game.
It shall be. So a couple of options here. Looking at yours, Pat, we got North Dakota State, San Diego State.
That's right. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Aztecs have been in kind of a scoring funk recently, unable to score more than 60 points in 3 of their last 4 games, and that's not going to change here. The Bison have a stellar defense, like I mentioned before, and they shoot the ball. They have the best shooting percentage in the nation, I believe. I think it's like 50.9%. The Bison are one of my Cinderellas this year. They're going to the Sweet 16.
You know, if that happens, Fargo will go crazy. They love their Bison up there in North Dakota. I really think any of the permutations of these 4 teams are possible to meet up here in the second round. I have Oklahoma and New Mexico State. I'm really not sure about the staying power of any of those 4 teams. They're just outmatched, I think, when you look at the other teams in the region. I'm going to go with the Sooners on this one, but again, it could go either way.
Absolutely right.
And we'll move on to the bottom. You have Nebraska taking on Creighton.
That's right, and I think the key to this game will be rebounding. Nebraska gets out-rebounded in almost every single game they play, and the Blue Jays have had stellar play on the boards all season. Plus, Doug McDermott and company beat the Cornhuskers by 15 earlier this year. I think history repeats itself. Creighton also moves on.
So I want to say Creighton. I know a lot of people want to say Creighton. New team, got a new blood, want to always see this new team coming up and making a far run in the tournament. I simply think Baylor's going to have too much when it comes down to what they've done in the Big 12. Creighton has obviously been a fantastic team this year, but looking down the stretch for Baylor, they beat Iowa State, Texas, Oklahoma, among some other wins, and again made a run in the Big 12 tournament. This game could go either way, and again, the Blue Jays tough. The Bears might be tougher in San Antonio, and that's an upset pick.
Absolutely.
Now, Oregon and Wisconsin, more of this home field, or home court, I guess it would be, Wisconsin and Milwaukee.
You're absolutely right. And finally, a second round game that third round, that we actually agreed on. This game, the Ducks have done nothing to stop teams this entire season, and obviously I think that continues here. Wisconsin, as we mentioned, has a fantastic defense. Bo Ryan's squads have always had a fantastic defense, and this year's team has a more than solid offense to back them up. Like I said, averaging 73.5 points per game. Badgers, once again, move on here.
Oregon and Wisconsin actually on paper pretty similar in terms of what their seasons have been. Wisconsin fell to that curse of the Big Ten where teams get up to the top and then just in the middle of the season kind of collapse. They went in that streak of losing 5 of their 6 in the middle of the season and then lost 2 of their last 3 down the stretch. Oregon, meanwhile, started 13-0, were number 10 in the country, and then just dive bombed. They ended up 3-8 in the Pac-12 at one point, but then won 8 in a row moving forward before they lost in the Pac-12 semifinals. Oregon's been one of those teams all year that you never really know what they're going to bring to any given game. So this is a crapshoot. You go up in Milwaukee, again, obviously the Badger crowd will be up, but I think the Ducks will be able to tap into what they did against Arizona on the last game of the regular season, pulled the upset of the Wildcats. I like the number 7 Ducks to pull a big upset over Wisconsin.
Very interesting.
And so we see this Sweet 16 is not at all in agreement between the two of us.
You're absolutely right. Hey, makes it more fun.
That it does. Oklahoma State, North Dakota State. I want to see how many people on ESPN.com had their brackets for this one.
You're absolutely right. Hey, listen to this. I love the Bison, but I think their magic runs out on the second weekend. Their defense is stellar, but I really think that Oklahoma State's sharpshooters on the outside will be up to the challenge. They rely on their outside shooters to move the ball around and really sink some threes to win their games, and I think that will be enough to beat the Bison here. In a low-seeded matchup. In fact, I don't think a 9-12 matchup has ever occurred in the NCAA tournament, but the 9 will prevail.
It's very possible we could see that this year right here in the West region. I think Oklahoma State has the potential to do that. Earlier in the season, I think a lot of people would have agreed with me that they would be in that situation. We'll see what happens. I've got Arizona and Oklahoma, and I mentioned before, I don't think anybody in this 5-13 block really has what it takes to hold a candle to the rest of the teams in the region. Arizona continues to cruise, continues to build on their balance, and they get on to the Elite Eight. Down at the bottom, you have Creighton and Wisconsin in what should be a fantastic matchup in California.
Could be a great matchup. I really hope to see this one because it could be really exciting. Creighton's offense is scary good, but Wisconsin's isn't that far behind. They shoot, I think, 46% from the field, and plus they have a slightly better defense than the Jays, and I think that's going to be the difference in this one. Wisconsin's defense will finally put an end to Dougie McBuckets and the Jays season. I'd love to see Creighton make a run to the Final Four, but I don't think it'll happen. I think Wisconsin's defense will stop them. Doug McDermott has had a fantastic career. I would love to see him be able to go to the Final Four, but I don't think it'll happen. I think Wisconsin is a little bit better.
Creighton, Wisconsin should be fantastic. Baylor and Oregon.
Another great game.
Another great game, absolutely. My Sweet 16 matchup, and I think that's something a lot of people have wanted to see for the last couple of years, at least in the football realm. Baylor and Oregon have had it out for one another. Teams thinking Baylor is stealing from Oregon. There's just back and forth relationship. So if they met on the basketball court, it would be quite interesting. Baylor breaking out those new neon jerseys to rival those of the Ducks. Could be quite something. Bears led by Corey Jefferson. He's a senior, 13.5 points a game. Over on the Duck side, they have the leadership of Mike Moser and Jonathan Lloyd, and these two teams love to run the score up again. I'm going to go with Oregon on this one. I think both teams have great potential here, but I do believe Oregon has a few more senior leaders that can get them over the edge and put them into the Elite Eight. And as we move on to said Elite Eight, the Cowboys and the Badgers is your call, Pat.
That's right. And I do think that the key to this game is going to be turnovers. The Badgers rarely give the ball away, just over 8 turnovers per game. And I think their stingy defense is going to force the Cowboys to make a couple turnovers as they try to throw the ball around the outside in order to set up that 3 from the sharpshooters on the outside. I think Bo Ryan's team will rely on that stellar defense like they have in the past in order to get past this game. Going to be a great one. But I like the Wisconsin Badgers to move on to the Final Four.
On Wisconsin. And now, what I've got here, my Elite Eight matchup, a Pac-12 rematch, Arizona versus Oregon. Both of these games have been very close between these two teams this year. The home team has won both times. I referenced earlier that Oregon ended the season with a win in Eugene over the Wildcats, so this one could be great. I've also said before that you never know what the Ducks are going to bring. They've been very streaky this year. Arizona, on the other hand, been pretty consistent throughout the season, and I think they're going to have what it takes to push through Oregon and get all the way to the Final Four. Wildcats.
So even with a lot of disagreements, we still have the 1s and 2s making their way to the Final Four.
It's the beauty of March Madness.
There you go.
It all works out in the end. Well, that's the West region. Brett Williams, Pat Cloney for you. We're going to send it to the crazy Midwest.
We're back here on this special edition of the SEC Roundtable with March Madness. I'm Nick Jones, and alongside me is Brian Principe. We're going to get ready to talk about the Midwest bracket, and the first matchup is going to be between Wichita State and Cal Poly and Texas Southern. Wichita State finished 34-0 this season, and they look to continue their winning ways. Now, Brian, what is your take on this matchup?
Well, we all know about the hype about Wichita State, the Corn Shockers. They're a phenomenal team. They haven't really been tested yet, though. They have Ron Baker and Clay Anthony early. They have been the leaders for Wichita State. I do not think that, I especially do not think that Cal Poly can beat Wichita State. Texas Southern might make the game close than most people think, but I'm going to go with Wichita State for the win here. Not another 16-1 upset like we all predicted. It won't happen this year again.
I agree with your pick as well. I think Wichita State's going to beat them off the boards, and they're not going to give Cal Poly or Texas Southern any second opportunities to get some points on the board. And our second game is between the Kentucky Wildcats and Kansas State. The Kentucky Wildcats made it to the SEC Championship game, but they lost by 1 point to the Florida Gators, and they are 5-5 in their last 10 games. Kansas State has lost their last 3 straight games, but they have notable wins against Iowa State, Kansas, and Texas. So, Brian, what do you feel has the upper hand in this matchup?
I think this is a very intriguing matchup. The two Wildcats here, pretty evenly matched. We have Kentucky, who was undoubtedly one of the most hyped teams coming into the season, ranked number 1 in the preseason poll. We have the Harrison twins, Cauley Stein, and of course, the freshman of the year in the SEC, Julius Randle. But I think that what's going to give Kentucky a little bit of trouble here in this will be Marcus Foster. He averages 15 points a game for Kansas State. However, I think the game will be close, but Kentucky's size and athleticism will get them past Kansas State here in a close game between the two Wildcats.
Once again, I also have to agree. I think Randall's going to be too much for the Wildcats of Kansas State to handle. He's averaging 15 points a game and at least 10 assists per game. So now our next matchup, what do you know? We have our first disagreement.
It's about time, right?
Yeah, I think the Kentucky Wildcats are going to beat Wichita State. You know, Kentucky has not been that consistent this season, but I think the overall talent's going to outplay Wichita State. You know, Kentucky didn't play that well at the beginning of the season, but in the later half they kind of picked it up. When they played Florida the first time in Gainesville, they got blew out. But during the SEC Championship game, they only kept it to a 1-point difference. So I think Kentucky is going to win this matchup. And now we get ready for the North Carolina State versus Louisville game. What's your take on this, Brian?
I think this is going to be an interesting matchup. Like most matchups in this bracket, Louisville and NC State, very similar teams, not really defensive-minded, more offensive-minded. Remember, Louisville last year was very defensive-minded with Peyton Siva. But I think I'm going to ride the wave here. I'm really sold on Louisville. NC State has been playing very well. Louisville's been playing even better. I'm going to go with the hot team again in Louisville and have them go advance to the Sweet 16.
Well, the disagreement doesn't last for long because I also picked Louisville. Louisville, I just think it's just the better team. They have more talent, and I think Warren's going to have a little tough time trying to shoot against this Louisville defense. Now we go to Iowa, Tennessee, the winner of that game, versus Duke.
Again, another interesting matchup here. Duke, offensive-minded. Tennessee, Iowa, a little defensive-minded. Big guys going for rebounds. Duke, very small, very, very small. They have a small offensive-minded team. I want to say Tennessee. I want to say Iowa. I'm not really sold on Duke, but my gut tells me Duke. This is really a toss-up for me. I'm going to go with the Blue Devils. I'm not completely sold on this one. This one could go either way. Once again, probably could be an overtime game. Could be a very close game, come down to a final shot, maybe by Parker, maybe by Hood. I'm going to go with the Blue Devils. I'm not sold, but I'm going to go with Duke.
Yeah, this will be a very intense matchup, I think, because Duke's been very inconsistent this year. They've played well against Syracuse and North Carolina, but earlier this season they took a loss to Wake Forest. So it's going to be a close matchup, but I still feel like Duke's going to pull it out in the end.
They play down to their opponents sometimes, but I think that actually might help them in this situation. These two teams are no schlep teams. They really are pretty good teams. That's why I'm going to go with Duke.
Yeah, I think Duke's been pretty clutch when it comes down to the game-winning shots.
That's Duke for you.
Yes. So now we go to Texas and Michigan.
Well, another interesting matchup. This one I think is not as evenly matched up here. Michigan, like I said, lives and dies by the three-pointer, not very defensive-minded. They play in that Big Ten style of basketball. You have Texas with the big men for the Big 12 style of basketball. I'm going to go with Michigan. I really like Michigan. They've started off very poor in the beginning of the season, but they have really come on strong, and they really have been playing well in the recent time here. I'm going to go with Michigan, the Wolverines, to take on and defeat Texas.
Yeah, Michigan's been very consistent so far this season, and I think they're a lot more consistent than Texas has been. So once again, I will also pick Michigan.
Okay.
So now we go back to the top. Let's see. Brian, you picked Wichita State for the matchup against Louisville. So what do you feel?
I think this is where the magic for the Shockers runs out. I think Louisville is just too offensive-minded for Wichita State. The size on paper, you might say this might be a Wichita State kind of game. But if you look past the paper, the statistics, This is where you got to go to Russ Smith. The way he's been playing is just ridiculous. I don't think that's going to stop at any time here. I think he's going to continue to play well. Wichita State's smaller team. I'm going to go with Louisville. I'm really sold on this team.
I'm also going to pick Louisville in this matchup. I think that Louisville has been more consistent than Kentucky has this season. Kentucky has lost to the Razorbacks twice this season, also to the South Carolina Gamecocks. And I think Louisville is going to rely on Russ Smith to put some points on the board, and they're going to overcome the Kentucky Wildcats in that matchup. So now we have another game between the Duke and Michigan Wolverines.
Right, and I think this is a game where both teams are pretty similar. Both teams like to go for the three-pointer, except for Jabari Parker. He likes to play inside, get a little mismatch down low. I think that's where Duke might excel here with Parker. Michigan doesn't really have a defender. McGarry's out. That's a huge loss for Michigan. It's been all year, but they've been able to overcome that. But I think that Michigan will ride a wave here again, hit some three-pointers, and win this one potentially in overtime or close game again. But I'm going to go with the Wolverines. I'm not sold on Duke to make it to the Elite Eight or Final Four. That be?
Yeah, this is going to be a very close game, but I think earlier this season Duke and Michigan actually played, and Duke outlasted them. And I think this is going to be a close one, but I still feel that Duke's going to pull out the win in this one.
Those were two totally different teams too. You got to put that into perspective. But I definitely can agree that this game's going to be close, so it could go either way.
And now we get down to the final game before the Final Four. So we go between Louisville and Michigan and Louisville and Duke.
Well, this one we all remember last year. It was the championship game, Louisville and Michigan. Some unsung heroes, potentially again some unsung heroes in this game. For me, you got to throw all the stats out for this one. This is just going to be a dogfight between these two teams. Very offensive-minded, both. Defense a little lacking for both teams. Once again, Louisville's been riding a tremendous wave, playing very well. I'm going to go with the Cardinals again to beat Michigan, this time to go to the Final Four.
This is also going to be a close matchup between my pick between Louisville and Duke, but my big thing is consistency. I think that Louisville is way more consistent than Duke has because Duke's lost, like I said, to Wake Forest and smaller teams, and but I think Louisville is just going to pull it out and win this side of the bracket.
A big thing for Louisville is I think they're going to be angry that they're a 4 seed. They play better than what they've been given. And I think that's going to play a lot, especially with Rick Pitino. We know how great of a coach he is. He's putting that in his players' minds, saying, look, they snubbed us. They don't think we're that good, But I think they're going to try to prove that they are better than a 4 seed, and that's going to show in this game potentially against Michigan.
I agree. So that's going to wrap it up for our analysis for the Midwest bracket. So let's get ready for the Final Four predictions.
All right, so here's my Final Four predictions. Here I have Florida, Michigan State, Louisville, and Creighton. And I really wrestled with Michigan State here. I went back and forth with them and Villanova, but I think the defense and the health of Michigan State is going to overcome Villanova and Jay Wright's Wildcats. Florida, number 1 seed. I think they'll be able to get there. Maybe a couple of difficult games here and there, but they should be able to get to the Final Four with ease. I love Louisville. We just talked about that in the Midwest bracket. I love the way Louisville's playing. I think they're riding a tremendous wave to the Final Four. And Creighton. I think a lot of people want to pick Creighton. I think this is their year. I think they're always in it. Everyone kind of says, Creighton's a great team. But I think Doug McDermott is finally ready to make that step. It's his senior year. He wants to go out a bang. I think Creighton will get into the Final Four. So now with the matchups here, Florida, Michigan State, a very interesting matchup. Florida likes to score. Michigan likes to play defense. What's going to give? I think Florida is just too tough. Scotty Wilbekin and Dorian Finney-Smith are just too good for I think it's just going to be too much, and I think the Gators will win this one against Michigan State. It's going to be close, but Florida will win this side of the bracket. Now on to Creighton and Louisville. I love Creighton. I love Louisville. What's going to give? Louisville's just been too hot. Louisville's going to win, and they will play Florida in the final here. Once again, Louisville will be there in the final. Now Florida, number 1 seed in the tournament. Louisville, number 4, coming out of the Midwest, the very difficult Midwest. I think that's going to help them. They play a very difficult schedule coming all the way to the Final Four in the final game. The Gators are too good. They've been playing very well, winning the SEC tournament. Florida is going to be your champion in the 2014 NCAA March Madness tournament. The Gators will win this year.
All right, here in my Final Four, I got Florida playing Michigan State and Arizona playing Louisville. In the matchup between Florida and Michigan State, I think Florida's going to win this matchup. I think that Florida's been more consistent all season. They've only lost 2 games to UConn and Wisconsin. And Michigan State did win the Big Ten tournament, but I think Florida's going to make it to the national championship game. And in the other matchup between Arizona and Louisville, these are 2 very consistent squads. I think Louisville is probably going to have the upper hand in this situation because they've been in the situation just last year. And I think that Louisville is going to make it to the big dance, and they're going to play Florida. And when it comes down to the final national championship game, I think that Florida, since they haven't won a national championship since 2008, I think that Florida is going to beat Louisville for the national championship.
All right, we got it down to my final 4. I've got Florida, Michigan State, Baylor, and Louisville. Florida, I've already touched on. Michigan State's getting all their pieces back at the right time. You got Keith Appling, Gary Harris, Adrian Payne. They're going to be a force. You got Baylor, is a surprise at a 6 seed. They of all the Big 12 teams, probably not the one you would expect to go to the Final Four. But with the front court of Corey Jefferson and Isaiah Austin, they match up well with a lot of teams through their region, like Wisconsin and Creighton, and I think they can make a push all the way through Arizona to get to North Texas. And Louisville, the defending champs, they've been playing out of their minds lately, just running through teams. Rick Pitino has got these guys motivated as a 4 seed. They should not have been seeded that low, and that's going to be an extra chip on their shoulder going to the Final Four. If we look at Florida and Michigan State, I like Florida in this matchup. Michigan State, as good of a late season run as they've made, Florida's been so consistent. They've won tight games all throughout the year, and I think they're going to have to squeak out another one. But ultimately, their guard play, it's going to come down to Wilbekin versus Gary Harris, and I'm going to take Wilbekin in this one. And Louisville-Baylor, I think Louisville's front court, Montrezl Harrell is a monster, and if anyone can match up against Jefferson and Austin, it's him. Russ Smith going up against Kenny Cherry in the backcourt, another great matchup. Hancock versus Brady Heslip, both can shoot the lights out, but I'm going to take Louisville overall. And then really interesting storyline in the national championship if we get to it, Florida versus Louisville. Way back in 1987, Rick Pitino was coaching the Providence Friars. His star player on that team, Billy Donovan. And I think the coach back then will be the winning coach today. Rick Pitino and the Louisville Cardinals repeat.
Okay. All right, folks, I got my final 4 here for you. Florida, Connecticut, Arizona, and Louisville. With Florida, their seniors, their coaching, their momentum, their experience, all of which I think will allow them to go through the South region with ease. As for Connecticut, this is a bit of a crazy pick, I admit, because they could go down to St. Joseph's in the first round. But if they don't, I think Shabazz Napier and company will match up well with the other teams that they would probably face. And ultimately, UConn's lost 8 games this year, 3 of those to Louisville, 2 to SMU, so they didn't really lose to a lot of different teams, and I think that will bode well for them moving forward. As for Arizona, I talked about this earlier in my little regional section. I think they've got great balance, offense, defense. They've got solid leaders, and I think that'll take them through another favorable draw through the West. As for the Midwest, it's really a crapshoot in terms of what team's going to come out of there, but Louisville is angry at the low seed, or you would assume that they would be. They've got Russ Smith, Montrezl Harrell, Luke Hancock. They have all the experience, all the weapons to get to the Final Four without a whole lot of a problem. Now we look up at the matchups with Florida. Like I said, a lot of momentum coming through for the Gators. And really at this matchup, we're going to start to see the conferences play out because UConn coming from the American, overall a lot stronger than the SEC when you look at the total league and the competition that these two teams have faced over and over on a daily basis. Plus, who was the last team to beat Florida before they went on their win streak? UConn. I got them doing it again. Moving on to this side of the bracket, Arizona-Louisville will be a fantastic matchup if this actually happens. Looking at 2 fantastic teams, proven it all year, and now getting a chance to show it on the national stage in North Texas. But I'm going to look to the momentum. Ultimately, that turns to Louisville, one of the hottest teams in the country, and I think they get back to the national championship game. Which, of course, sets up an interesting matchup here. A rematch of the American Championship game. And, again, these 2 teams have played 3 times already this year. Could Louisville actually beat UConn for 4 straight times in one single season? It's a little bit shaky, but at the same time, Louisville knows what it takes to win right here, right now. And Shabazz Napier and company, again, they got talent, but Kemba Walker is not really here to put on the Husky magic. Plus, consider this. Pizza Hut has decided that it will give free wings to all of America if a winged mascot wins it all. Cue the Cardinals. And of course, Pizza Hut is part of the Yum Brands company. Where does Louisville play? The KFC Yum Center. Cards are 2014 NCAA champions.
All right, guys, so check it out. We got my Final Four right here. We got Florida, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Louisville. Earlier in the show, you heard my love affair with Wisconsin. And what do all of 3 of my other Final Four teams have in common? They all won a major conference tournament. And I'm of the opinion that this late in the season, that's what matters, is getting hot, getting on a win streak. And that's exactly why I have 2 4 seeds in my Final Four. And you know what? Those 2 4 seeds are the 2 hottest teams in the NCAA right now, and I think these guys, Michigan State and Louisville, Michigan State led by Tom Izzo, they're on a roll right now. They are finally hot. They're finally healthy after a pretty up and down season with some of the players coming out. They went on a 6-7 stretch, but they're healthy now. They laid waste to Michigan in the Big Ten championship game. They look solid right now. At the same time, Louisville, exact same way, breezed through the American Athletic Conference tournament. These 2 teams will meet up in the championship game. So we got Michigan State against Louisville. And while a lot of people would like to believe that Louisville will go off of last year's success and repeat as NCAA champions, I'm going the opposite way. Michigan State is absolutely on a roll right now. I don't think anyone can stop them, not even Rick Pitino and Russ Smith. Michigan State is your NCAA champion.
In my Final Four, I have the Florida Gators, Michigan State Spartans, Wisconsin Badgers, and the defending national champion Louisville Cardinals. The matchup over here between Michigan State and Florida, I think the backcourt of Florida with Michael Frazier and Scotty Wilbekin will be too much for Michigan State and their backcourt of Gary Harris and Keith Appling. The Gators will go on to the championship game. Wisconsin, they've had the best offensive team that they've had under Bo Ryan and probably his tenure, but the Louisville Cardinals are angry that they only got a 4 seed in this tournament. They're playing like a 1 seed at this point of the year. Louisville will take on the Gators in the national championship game, and Billy Donovan beats his former coach in the national championship. And Florida will get its 3rd national championship in 8 years. It's going to be awesome, baby.
Okay, so my 4 teams, like Pat and Stan, are Florida, Michigan State, Wisconsin, and Louisville. This matchup between Florida and Michigan State, in my opinion, is just going to be a fantastic coaching matchup. As already mentioned before, great guard matchup, Michael Frazier and Scotty Wilbekin against Gary Harris and Keith Appling. I think the big battle is going to be in the post between Adrian Payne and Patrick Young, but I think Florida right now presents too many matchup problems for Michigan State, too consistent. All 5 guys and players I'll mention score. I think Wilbekin's the best defender and the best guard defender in college basketball. And I think Michael Frazier is the X factor, the way he can shoot threes. So I have Florida beating Michigan State. And in the next game, we have Wisconsin and Louisville. In my opinion, Louisville should have been a number 1 or a number 2 seed, I believe, because they won their conference tournament. They've been one of the best teams in the country. Wisconsin, even though they had their best offense under Bo Ryan, they have a great defense as well. But I think Louisville has too much talent. I think Russ Smith is the X factor in this game. I think he can pull Louisville ahead of Wisconsin. And much respect to Rick Pitino and Bo Ryan, but I think Rick Pitino has the championship experience to lead Louisville to the championship game. So as mentioned earlier, we have the ultimate matchup between the student and the teacher with Billy Donovan for Florida and Louisville and Rick Pitino. And I think Florida has been the most consistent team in the country all season long with their 2 losses and going undefeated in the SEC. So I think Florida is your NCAA champion. And because they have the Onions, they're going to win this NCAA tournament.
All right. So I'm breaking the tradition of the Midwest bracket. I'm putting Wichita State coming out of here. They've had their undefeated season. They're 34-0. They won their conference tournament. Creighton, Doug McDermott is an offensive threat. I think that's an understatement. This matchup is going to be very intense. I think the Shockers are going to pull this out, continue their unbeaten streak, and go to the national titles. If I can spell Wichita State, that would be great. There we go. Other side of the bracket, Florida and Villanova. Nova is an interesting pick, as we've discussed in the East regional breakdown, as they've been an untrustworthy team. They're this far. They're going to take on the Florida Gators. Florida, the last time they reached the #1 seed in the AP poll, they did win the national title. I have them taking down Villanova in the Final Four, which brings us to the championship game. Like I said, last time Florida got to #1, they did win. Shockers are coming off an undefeated season. I'm going to say that history will be made. Shockers are going to win the national title and shock everybody.